What's up everybody, Fritz here. It is a beautiful day, not only because of the weather, but businesses are starting to finally open back up in California, which means there's no better opportunity for us to do a test drive in the M235i and test out those TMS Sway bars as well as the SPL end links. Let's get into the video. Before we get into the video, if you guys could, just let me know how you like this new microphone system that I'm using. The old microphone system, although it's good, it's really hard to do in these car vlogs. It really picks up a lot of the road noise that comes in through the car, especially on the freeways. And I'm also thinking about doing YouTube shorts to answer a lot of common questions that I see, but don't really warrant a full video on their own. If you feel that that's something that you would want, also let me know down in the comment section, as well as anything else that you would want me to make a YouTube short about. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into the deep dive of the TMS Sway bars, as well as the SPL end links, since they are working together. And in order to really appreciate them, we have to take a look at what the car is doing in a turn, because that's when the sway bars come into play. Naturally, when the car is taking a turn, the portion of the car that's on the inside part of the turn has a smaller turning radius, while the outside portion of the car has a larger turning radius. This causes the inside portion of the car to dip down, while the outer portion of the car will lift up. This causes an imbalance between the grip of the tires that are going through the turn. So looking at the fronts, for example, the inside tire will have more grip because it's more planted, it's pressed up against the ground, while the outside tire has less grip because it's lifted up a little bit. Now, there's a little bit of benefit here because we don't want extreme grip on the outside tire, because we want it to travel the distance of the entire turn. We want more grip on the inside tire because it's actually helping us pivot through the turn. And what a sway bar does is it helps offset this lift in the car. It keeps the outside tire a little bit more grounded, allowing it to have more grip through the turn. Having less lift will give you more confidence to go at a tighter turn at higher speeds. What this does effectively for you as the driver, as well as the passenger in the car, is that it gets rid of your body roll. Essentially that feeling of falling or slipping that you'll experience when taking that tight turn at a higher speed. And the sway bar achieves this by acting as a spring in between the two struts that it's connecting. The struts have a location in which the end links will bolt onto, and then the bottom portion of the end link will be joined by the sway bar itself. And because it's acting as a spring, the thicker the spring, the more effective it will get, essentially. Now, since the sway bar is a spring, naturally the thicker the sway bar, the better it will perform. Think about the springs that are in our cars, something like this. It is relatively thick because it has to support the entire weight of the car. But if we compare that to a much thinner spring, something like a slinky as this, if this was your spring, it would completely fail and your ride quality would definitely suffer. Now, unfortunately, our sway bars are a linear spring, unlike a coiled spring that we have here, where we can add to the overall length of the spring, but keep the overall height the same. We don't have that option here. So the only option that we have for our sway bars is to go thicker. Now, there is some adjustability here, as you can see with these points of adjustability on the sway bar that we have here. We actually have 2 points of adjustability in the front and 3 points of adjustability in the rear. But when we select those further out points of adjustability, we're either lengthening or shortening our sway bar from factory. In order to accommodate for that, you have to change the height in which the sway bar is working in. Now, this doesn't change your overall ride height, so your car won't be lowered here at all, but what you're doing is changing the plane in which your sway bar is working in by either lengthening or shortening the end links to make sure that you have full range of motion of the ball joint in the end link, but also that the sway bar isn't pinching or binding or rubbing against anything when it's actually flexing in and out of the turn. When it comes to the front sway bar, you want to make sure that you change the length to the point in which that your front sway bar will not bump up against your tie rod end right there. And for the rear, what you want to make sure is that when it goes underneath, it's not pushing up against the guides that hold in the brake pad wear sensor wiring. Here, it might seem like it's rubbing up against it right now, but once you actually have the car at ride height, the sway bar and the rear upper control arm
actually develop some gap there. So this will only increase once we're at ride height.
If you decide to go back to the OEM end links, it might not work out the best in your favor long term because they do have some plastic components in it, the rears being completely plastic, and under enough stress because the ball joint isn't getting the full articulation because it's kind of preloaded in one direction or the other, it could snap. So I would say just either save up your money a little bit more or only do the fronts, because this is the one that I would recommend that you do first. 90% of the body roll is taken care of by the fronts. It requires a little bit of a different skill set when you're installing it. You don't have to worry about the exhaust, the drivetrain, or any wires or sensors in your way when you're removing the actual sway bar and putting in the new one. And to oversimplify it, I suppose that you could say that you could really muscle your way through that front sway bar, because you have the jack to support it. You have the engine support up top to hold the weight of the engine, so you don't really have to worry about too many things falling on top of you if everything's properly supported. When you look at the rear, it requires a completely different skill set. You have to worry about the drivetrain, lower the exhaust as well, and then carefully lower down the rear subframe by the differential, but not too much, in order to make sure that you don't put too much stress on the drivetrain, but enough to make sure that you can get out the sway bar. And then you have to make sure that you don't pull out or tug on any of the wires when you're getting the sway bar out and putting the new one in. The only part of the rear sway bar that I would say really requires some muscle is when you have to get the sway bar out and around from the control arm up top. Other than that, everything else is really finesse, and you have a lot more to worry about here too. You have a few more panels and splash shields to take out before you can get access to the rear sway bar. But once you have it in, you're going to notice that the rear end of the car snaps back with the rest of the car a whole lot faster. Not saying that it's going to throw you from one side or the other like you're going to fishtail it, but it really helps align the car a whole lot sooner through the turn. I myself didn't notice this until I had the rear sway bar in, but I accidentally compensate for my turns by either finishing up the turn slowly, or I actually wait to commit to my next maneuver in the roadway while waiting for the rear end to align with the rest of the car. That's how the car felt like in comparison with the stock sway bars. It felt very segmented. Maybe it's less of an effect with the 2 Series because of that shorter wheelbase and the reduction in height. But just the ability to turn in better and that shorter wheelbase probably solves most of the problems in the 2 Series. So for those of you who have a 3 or a 4 Series and you have a longer wheelbase and the car is a little bit taller and you've done this installation, please share your insight and let me know if doing the rear sway bar is more of a 60-40 split for you versus a 70-30 for me. Before we get into the cons of the sway bars, because there are a couple but not too many, I would say, a lot of comments that came in were asking, do you need to torque down the end links while the car's under load? And the answer to that is no. The only reason why we did it for the rear is because we undid the control arm, so we needed to tighten down the control arm at ride height. And the reason why is because it has rubber bushings. A rubber bushing is meant to hold whatever it's holding in place and meant to only resist a certain amount of force. With polyurethane bushings, the sway bars move freely in the bushing now, and so we don't have to worry about busting open or tearing through the rubber bushing anymore. So what are the cons of doing these sway bars? The first one, I suppose I would say, is the effort that goes into actually installing them. If you're somebody who has these tools and has the confidence, then I would definitely recommend just go ahead and get it done. Yes, there are a little bit more tedious steps along the way, but I feel like most people could do it. Just take your time. Lowering the subframe looks and sounds more intimidating than it actually is. But if you guys are in the Bay Area and you need some help, just let me know. Hit me up in the comment section. And if you prefer to have it done at a mechanic, then I'm going to leave my recommended mechanic down in the description as well. The major con that I experienced is that the powder coating did not hold up on my sway bars. Taking it out of the box, I noticed that there was some chipping with the sway bar, and I just wrap it in some Smurf blue vinyl wrap just to protect the bar itself from rusting. Kind of like out of sight, out of mind, so to me, it's not that big of a deal. Another potential one-off is that I had a little bit of rubbing on the front subframe on the passenger side of the car. Right where the weld was, there was some rubbing there, so all I did was just take some grease and apply it in the area, and it seems to be fine now. Now, maybe my car has a little bit of flex in the subframe. It could also be that maybe my weld sticks out a little bit more. Maybe my particular bar was bent upon arrival just a little bit. It could be a myriad of things that could be a one-off. Because I do really like Turner. They make really good products. I actually made my short shifter. So again, it could be a one-off, but just as a heads up, if any of you guys experience this, you're not alone. And Turner actually went the extra mile to compensate me for these inconveniences that I experienced. So hopefully they're aware of it, they'll inspect it, and it'll be all the better for it. The last con is that you need to upgrade your end links as well to make sure that you're getting the most out of your sway bars, because if they can't pivot in the end links, what good are they? And if when they pivot, they're pinching, binding, or rubbing up against something, that's not going to suit your needs really well. So if this is something that you're planning to do, just save up the little bit of extra money in order to get the right end links for them. Just to wrap this video up, because California is finally open, so we can do indoor dining, which is fantastic. Would I recommend this modification? 100%, I absolutely would. If you're a little bit worried about the fitment because of the rubbing that I mentioned, then by all means you could go to a 30 or a 31, and that should fit perfectly fine. If you want the stiffest suspension when you're going in and out of the turn, these sway bars are definitely going to do that for you. It's actually fun to do the installation, in my personal opinion, if you don't have to film. When you have to film this and it's such a small tight area, you're really working at weird angles and not very ergonomically, so it's super uncomfortable to do this job while filming. But if I wasn't filming it, I would have a blast doing it. And also we're doing a little bit of routine maintenance here as well, right? Because eventually rubber bushings, they do need to be replaced. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're replacing those rubber bushings with polyurethane ones that are serviceable because of the Zerk fitting. So they'll essentially last us a lifetime. And probably my favorite thing about this modification is that you only notice it in a turn. Unlike coilovers where your entire ride quality changes straight through a turn, no matter what, you're going to notice your coilovers. So if you're debating if you should do this or coilovers, and if you appreciate the comfort of your BMW as it is, then I would say do the sway bars first. And if it's still not enough for you, then go up to something like coilovers. Otherwise, this is going to probably be perfect for you and you're going to be super happy with it. But if you feel that there's something that I left out or didn't address, let me know down in the comment section below. And if you're looking to pick up a set of sway bars for yourself as well as the end links, it's going to be all in the links down in the description. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. And I'll see all of you guys in the next one.